Thank you to everyone for being here tonight and sharing the space with BMI and Diana. I want to begin by thanking BMI's donors, Beverly Rogers, Miriam Shearing, and the Rogers Foundation. This program is supported by the Asian and Asian American Studies program, the Interdisciplinary Gender and Ethnic Studies Department, and the Neon Pacific Initiative. It is also funded in part by the Nevada Arts Council and the National Endowment for the Arts. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones. I'll be introducing Diana Khoi Nguyen shortly, and then after her presentation, we will be in conversation about her work. She will take a few questions from the audience. After the reading, Diana's work will be available in the lobby where she will also sign books. Please join other upcoming events with the Black Mountain Institute, like an evening with Teju Cole next Tuesday, November 19th. Free registration and full details are available at Black Mountain Institute's website, which is blackmountaininstitute.org. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas wishes to acknowledge and honor the indigenous communities of this region and recognize that the university is situated on the traditional homelands of the Nuwu Southern Paiute people. We offer gratitude for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for the opportunity to study, learn, work, and be in community with this land. We encourage everyone in this space to engage in continued learning about the indigenous peoples who work and live on this land since time immemorial, including the Las Vegas Paiute tribe and the Moapa Band of Paiutes. I first heard about Diana's work when I was a PhD student in the English department at the University of Denver. And I remember my professors and fellow students speaking about the work she had done there with so much respect and admiration. It was clear that she had left an enduring mark on our department, and upon reading Ghost of, it was easy to see why. Diana's work pulls apart language and history, that of ourselves as individuals and that of our families, countries, the natural world around us. In her latest collection, Root Fractures, she reckons with colonial violence, empire, her identity and position as a Vietnamese American artist, journeys across air, across sea, across time, death, and grief. Her poems leap across the page, shaped in relation to photographs and negative space, pointing to her background as both a poet and multimedia artist. One line that remained with me after reading Root Fractures was this: "I exist to resist the will of another," a line that brings me closer to the possibilities of poetry. Diana Khoi Nguyen earned a BA in English and Communication Studies from UCLA, an MFA from Columbia University, and a PhD from the University of Denver. Her debut poetry collection, Ghost of, was selected by Terrence Hayes for the Omnidon Open Contest and was a finalist for the National Book Award and LA Times Book Prize. It received the 2019 Kate Tufts Discovery Award and Colorado Book Award. Her poetry, prose have appeared widely in magazines and journals such as Poetry, American Poetry Review, and PEN America. A Kundiman Fellow and member of the Vietnamese diasporic artist collective She Who Has No Masters, Nguyen's other honors include awards from the 92Y Discovery Poetry Contest, Key West Literary Seminars, and Academy of American Poets. Currently, she teaches creative writing at Randolph College Low-Residency MFA and is an assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Her second poetry collection, Root Fractures, which I hear she'll be reading from today, came out with Scribner in January this year and was one of LitHub's poetry books to read in 2024. Of this work, Layli Long Soldier praises, "As they illuminate what once was broken, each of these poems glimmers and pulses along a pathway cut out, not for one person alone, but as enduring starlight for generations to come." Please help me in welcoming Diana Khoi Nguyen.
Thank you. Thanks, Wendy. Usually it's hard to hear people talk about you, but that was not so bad. You know, and I like knowing that we were in the same city at different times, you know. Yeah, hi. Whoa, okay, I'm learning this mic. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your time this evening. Yeah, just much gratitude to BMI and to everybody who's taught the work. If you've read the work, if you're a stranger to the work, cool, welcome. And I'm a generally cheerful person. However, the work does touch upon the suicide of my youngest sibling and violence within a family. But yeah, my favorite part is the conversation and Q&A. So even though these are really personal subject matters, I'm a very open person. So if you feel like you're trespassing, don't worry, just offer the question and I can redirect if it's too personal, yeah? So don't worry about it. I'm a professional, yeah? Okay, cool. I'm gonna read from the book and then I'm gonna share like a video thing that I did like last year, actually a year ago. And then, yeah, and then we'll chat. I'm doing okay? Yeah, cool, okay. Oh, also when you were reading the bio, I was like, Vicky now is gonna be reading tomorrow. I love thee. Okay, so yeah, hope to see you there. I'll be there because I'm still in town. If you're like, why is Diana there? Because she loves her. Okay. Kate, disappointment. In rising, articulation of the spine leaves one open for a slitting. Daisies thread tread marks in the road. I cannot trace my body, so press it against grass. From afar, I recognize the shivering seal pup on the trail. Dreading blood on the beak pecking at a beached carcass, I stumble. I'm going to share just a brief story about this next one. The next poem, which actually appears on the page right after the poem I just read, is called Selkie Weaning Young. And if you are rusty on your kind of Irish mythological creatures, as a friend of mine once said, Selkie is a part-time seal. I know, isn't that so smart? I know. Her name is Alexandra Begues. I did not coin that. I'm sharing this because the version in this book I revised 12 years after the initial version was written. And the initial version was written during my MFA, a time in which I erased all forms of ethnic culture, and I whitewashed everything. And I was like working through white people myth, you know? Nothing wrong with that, but I'm not white. So like after my brother died, I just started talking about what happened in our Vietnamese American family really bluntly. And I was like, okay, well, we gotta update this poem. But I didn't think to do it. Anyway, which is to say you never know the lifespan of your work, you know? It might come back. Okay, that was a long preamble. It's a short poem. Selkie Weaning Young. Finding her hide, we trailed fingers down, then against grains of fur thrusting shoulders into its waxy skin. This is how she found us, the past draped about us like a cloak, hands twisting peach halves from a core. Her form in the sound, a pandan leaf peeking through milk. The only seals in Vietnam, American men with green faces. All right, I'm gonna read this poem actually. I was at the Sewanee Writers Conference, and I was kind of nervous as like a BIPOC person to go to Tennessee. You know, I grew up in LA, so I was like, oh, I don't know, but it was an okay time. It was okay. You know, I felt like I had to like represent in the workshop, talk over the white men, you know, because I can do that now, but I couldn't 10 years ago. But I actually hung out with a lot of playwrights. I don't know, I just shared all of that. That was too much tea. I hung out with playwrights, I love them, and one of them, her name is Melissa Tien. She's amazing. She lives in New York, and she has this play called Best Life, and it has this maneuver in it where it's like a microaggression that happens between a black woman and a white woman in a cafe, and every time the aggression happens, they rewind and start over. It's kind of amazing. I think you can look it up. If you don't, you can just email me, I'll send you the play, because she sent it to me. Anyway, but I love this idea of recursion and starting over, so I took it to kind of explore mother-daughter relationship. Mine is not a microaggression, mine is just, I don't know. Okay, again. A woman gives birth, and a new word gets added to a list of those that describe her. This, too, will befall her, she fears, but she has another daughter, then another son. Then she forgets about her daughters. At least that's what you think. When the son dies, the family forgets themselves a bit more than they usually do, like a hole that expands only to contract shortly thereafter. Again. Because she could not forget the labor pains, as she could not forget the country left behind, the mother decides one child is enough. With her husband, she teaches the daughter that everything has at least two names. Water, Nuuk, Nuuk, country. They encourage the daughter, as they would have encouraged all their children had they had others. But you have to be practical, they tell their only child. Again. They tell her, remember Dr. Seuss? You are limited only by what you can imagine. Oh, the things you can think. The daughter learns to swim, to start a fire, teepee, and log cabin, to make tonkatsu. She fails at first, but gets back up. Fails and gets back up. Each time she fails a little less. Then she finds new ways to fail. The mother does not tell the daughter that this is how you transport yourself to a new look. Again. Every few years, the mother and daughter returns to Vietnam, wandering down alleys until they eat their way back home. That would have been me, the daughter says, nodding at a woman picking up noodles, soup for her child and her parents next door, she thinks. The mother points at a figure striding into a temple, ao yai curling like incense. No, that one is me, pointing instead at a woman on a motorbike, balancing market greens and 3 children. Amid the din of street traffic and sizzling meats, the faint sound of a drum, someone's hand testing the tension of stretched buffalo skin. And if the end of the war wasn't the end of anything, and the war was what it was, another plastic bead on a string of worthless beads, she would have endured the lean years, finding herself married, a mẹ, then a wai, in Doi Mai. Every Friday, she would eat ok with her grandchildren at their favorite stall, and her chow would show her what they made, gifts she stowed on the windowsill beside her bed. Again. She never marries, throws herself deeper into school, helping her mother with a secret pharmacy. When you are forced to disband, keep on going, just underground. Again. She marries later, after finishing school. In the lab, she meets her future husband, and when they welcome their first child, a son, he looks just like the daughter they didn't have. She marries later, yes, says, perhaps we just stop at 1 after giving birth to their son. But the husband always wanted daughters, so a compromise, a tear which becomes a chasm, begins. Again. A catch in the shower where all their long hairs tangle, slowing Nuuk down the drain. A bandaged hand does nothing to soften a mother's blow. But you can strike with words, the child learns, striking to stop the blows received, not realizing how a shield also cuts. No. Again. Exasperated, the mother says something she shouldn't have. Her daughter snaps back so fast the mother nearly flinches. Then silence like a box of bullets nestles in. 2 strong women in their difficult hour. The mother does not see or hear from her daughter for several years, and it is as if a time comes when neither daughter nor mother should have to respond to one another anymore. I was thinking of you, neither of them writes. Oh, the things you can think. Again. The mother pops into her neighborhood library for the first time in years. Time, like a great distance, can make an alien of you. She misses her children. Perhaps she sees them again, reading to each other, rifling through the picture books. Again. The mother doesn't have a daughter. The daughter, she doesn't have children of her own. When they meet by chance as tourists at a boat show in Wei, they realize they are both poets. What are the odds? Drifting along the perfume river, a boat peers into a mirror. What's the difference between a mirror and a window? You see yourself in one, your ghost in the other. Again, a ghost can host another, a mother. Trong 10 thứ bạn là bạn trong 10 thứ. The daughter takes her own life because it is a way of taking her mother's. Again, when the daughter miscarries, the mother flies over immediately. They sit on the daughter's bed, peeling and passing a pomelo between them. That which leaves the body cannot re-enter. Out on the ice, the daughter jigs her line, hoping for a bite. Below, hundreds of fish thrash and bruise on their way to spawn. They will spawn or die trying. Only after she guts her catch does the kokanee yield its clutch of eggs. Something inside the daughter's body drops. Why is time always running out? Hello, says the mother. Hi, Mama, says the daughter. Is everything okay? Yeah, just cleaning and thought of you. A voice, like a seam, can bridge a rupture, but language fails eventually. In a memory from before or one to come, the mother and the daughter walk the foam line of a beach at dusk. The evening fog which kisses one, kisses both. Perhaps one is carrying a small child or letting go an old ghost, or one holds her mother's hand, and the tide flowing and receding inches further inland, like a palm erasing where they have been. Sometimes I forget stuff, like that I forgot there was going to be Vietnamese. Ooh. I am not literate in Vietnamese, so if you ever encounter in this particular book Vietnamese and you're like, I don't know, I'm just going to read it, because it's like, it uses a Roman alphabet, you know? It doesn't use like characters. Anyway, you're reading it right, because that's how I would try to pronounce it too, is how I like to say. And because like you were in Denver, Wendy, I was like, this is pretty early on in the pandemic, but I think literally that first Thanksgiving, I was like, let's go ice fishing. Only in Colorado, but I'm like really into it. So if you guys want to do this, let's do it. I haven't figured out how to do that in Pennsylvania. I think I had to go up to Canada, but like I got the gear, okay? It's just an excuse to drink and wear layers to keep warm. I mean, that's really a lot of stuff, but anyway, okay. It's fun. It's like, oh my God, you like make a hole in the ice and you don't fall in. How does that work? We got the manual all. I think that's the word, AWL. Okay, I'm gonna stop, but we could talk about it in the Q&A if you want. Đổi mới. At the site where the wound will occur, we know that she was in the garden, the one she had cultivated, seed by seed, shortly after moving in with her husband and their 11 children, all of them together again after years of separation. Her husband and son's feet in America, her daughters and hers in Vietnam. First in Saigon, then a place unmentioned by the coast, underground, in hiding, waiting to make a successful bribe so they might board a vessel, any vessel, collective bride in dark waters facing an unknown stage. Boom, boom, she whispered to my mother. Butterfly, the word my mother used to reference our genitals. 2 cupped wings like a heartbeat. Boom, boom. In hiding all that year unmentioned by the coast, my mother, as a young girl, had her first period, its dark liquid unseen in their nest underground. boom, boom, the smear of red between my thighs perfectly symmetrical, 2 lips pressed together as if to kiss or to strike. Okay, I'm gonna tell you 2 mom stories and then something about Vicky now. I think that's okay to share this about her. I'll ask her. Well, I guess I'm asking her after the fact. 2 mother things. Okay, so like my mom and I, we've had this like up and down relationship. And now that there's like a grandchild, she gives 0 fucks about me, which is great. So who knew that I should have just had a kid, you know, like at 16 and maybe everything would have been fine. No, I don't know, that just should not have done that. Okay, so there's that. But like, you know, when I was in grad school, we were estranged, and she would like, she knows how to use the internet because she's like a software developer, so fuck, you know? But she like knew to Google me, and she would like read everything. Not that I had much out there, but I had like, this is during my whitewashed era, so like I had these like Hansel and Gretel poems, you know, about like a mean mom. And then the next time I saw her, she's like, I read what you wrote about me. It was bad. Anyway, so like, we can talk about like sharing work with family who are like hostile, but yeah, so when, this is crazy. So like when this book came out, she like wanted to fly to Pittsburgh. She doesn't travel, by the way, so it was crazy. She wanted to come, she's like, when is the book launch? And I was like, you don't have to come, it's gonna be on Zoom. You could do the Zoom up. She's like, no, I'll be there. And I was like, okay. And then I made this mistake because like I had copies and I gave her one when she arrived. I shouldn't have done that. But she'd bring out the book while I was eating lunch. And she would just sit there and read it quietly next to me. It was terrifying. Nobody should do that. But actually in that poem I just read, she pointed at the word miscarriage and she's like, did this happen to you? And then I was just like, you know, many women have miscarriage. I kind of went and did that. And then she's just like, but like, we don't talk about stuff. I'm just sharing that to say like, we don't talk about stuff in our family. And it was, maybe don't give your mom your book before she could already get it. Oh, the Vicky Now part. So I mentioned stuff about menstrual blood. V and her partner, they were doing this like wine app where like you can log like the bottles of wine that you drink, but she was writing reviews, and for one of them she wrote like, tastes like vampiric blood or something. And I was like, I love that, of course V would say that. But now when I drink red wine, I think of vampiric as an adjective to describe the wine. So that's the V Kino story. But I think that's also a creative writing craft story too. Okay, I'm gonna read one more in the book, and then I'll do like a little multimedia thing, and then we'll chat. Yeah, cool? Cool, okay. Doi, moi. When we found small tins tucked in unused drawers and unnoticed parts of the fridge, we fingered the language we would later recognize as his second. The one Ambanoi nudged him toward, because he was their eldest, and shouldn't the eldest integrate with the whites of that time? Within a month upon arrival, my father and his brother enrolled in engineering courses at Pasadena City College, taking shifts as attendants in the school parking lot. As his heavy eyelids lowered in their evening bus ride, shadows of palm trees washing over his face, did he think for a moment that he was back home? In California, the palm provides neither shade nor sustenance. This tree is ornamental, but we know what happens when palmitic and naphthenic acids are dropped on it. Brr, I tried to read, suspicious of the tin's greasy substance. I did not think to taste it, fearing bitterness, or worse, what if it burned me? Both child and refugee learn the words that surround them as well as words that mean harm. With the palm of his hand, a father may soothe or signal. But what about the palm that holds a child down gently, so a mother may strike? Okay, I'm just like noticing the time, and I want to get to this chat with Wendy. So I'm gonna skip the little video. If you want it, you can email me. I'll send it to you later. But okay, so I'm just gonna. Ooh, here we go. Okay, so. You get this in color because it's not, you're here with me and we're not looking at the book. But this does appear in the book as black and white. And this is a series called Beside. And basically every anniversary of my brother's death, I don't know what to do with my feelings, so I give myself a task and I just play around with this photographic archive where he had cut himself out 2 years before he died. And it's kind of like, it sounds kind of macabre, and maybe it was at first, but it was like, when you're just like, I'm not a person who just wants to sit and just feel like I need to do something with my hands, you know? So it gave me something to like focus on, like a task. And now it's actually like a comforting thing, you know? So grief evolves, of course. So this one particular year, I noticed that he like, even though he used an X-Acto knife, he left part of his shoe in, a little bit of his baby finger. And I was like, oh, look at the little finger. Anyway, so then I thought about who else is left. And so I started writing into the people and the bits that are left. And I'm only going to read the first and the last page of this, but I'll talk you through some decisions. And this is a series called Beside. Eshu. So we have some child bodies. And there's a moment that happens when nobody is watching, because usually you're alone when you're writing, where I was like, I made these bodies, and then I made the mama body, and I had one of these moments where you're like, oh, what if I put the babies back inside her body? You know, you're like as a kid, you don't think about that. As an adult, you're like, oh, that's kind of weird, but you're like, that's really fucked up. You're like, I'm gonna do it because nobody's watching me in this computer, and so I did it. And it really freaked me out. And I was like, let's add more. And then, of course, I was like, oh, let's take them all away. You know, I'm being really flippant with my tone, which is a way to mask my real feelings about this, as my therapist would tell you. But I wanted to really walk you through this because, like, there's some, like, you know, sometimes you have weird impulses in making. And I hope you honor them, even if nobody sees them, because you don't know what they will yield. And I'm really interested in, like, when you feel kind of funny. You know, like that, I don't know, kind of funny feeling. That's gold. Go there. It could be shit, but it could be something that you might share with strangers one day. Okay, so I'm gonna read the mother body and then we'll chat, okay? If we accept the camera's record, let it be known how she staged each of us, every gesture. We couldn't say no. Photographs trigger ones not taken, pictures forgotten in our minds. She cannot remember what she has done. What did she do to deserve such wretched children? She knows now she wasn't meant for this, didn't mean to do it, any of it. Let her undo it. Let it be undone to her, to all of us. The war, how it foreshadows. Okay. All right, thank you. Did it turn on?
I think
Okay. But I feel like
it's on.
This is an intimate enough space. Okay.
Maybe, okay, now it's on.
This is my emotional support. I used to fidget with my glasses, but then I got LASIK, so now I fidget with the water bottle. You know.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Just incredible reading. And thank you for sharing, you know, the visual elements with the audience. I think your work is so special and so unique from many poets because of the multimedia elements. And you know, I saw that in Ghost of, in your first collection, where you are borrowing from other visual forms like triptychs and kyotaku, which is this Japanese form of, you know, painting ink over fish and imprinting it on paper. And you know, I see that also in root fractures, the way you extend those considerations of the text and the image, where text is doubled over, like we saw, or it fills in, you know, empty spaces. And I'm really curious, like, as a, you know, multimedia artist, how do you approach text and the relationship of text with visual elements, and how do you navigate that on the page? And, you know, do you kind of craft them similar in a similar way? And how do you decide when a poem needs kind of to borrow from another form or to incorporate that into the text?
Thanks for that, Wendy. I would just like
liked just listening to you to describe. And then I was like, oh, I have to listen so I can answer. Okay, so I'm actually not consciously making a decision about a poem between like a normative poem where it's just text only versus like, oh, now I'm going to engage in image and text, if that makes sense. Like, I think I fell into the image and text work kind of accidentally because after my brother died, these pictures hung in our house, right? Like my brother cut himself out. They hung in the hallway to the kitchen, and we never talked about him. And then he died, and we still didn't talk about it, you know? And it was just like, for me, it became this kind of like, they became harbingers of like, so much like, of what was to come, and then also like, it became a site of shame, you know, and also guilt for like my silence and my inability to like communicate to him and to check in properly with him. But it's also like, was that even my job? I don't know, you know, like I still have complicated feelings about it. And so just really honestly, like the first time I worked with it, I wasn't trying to make a poem. I just didn't want to be haunted anymore. I didn't want to like feel scared.
And I remember, because my sister still, so like I like to say like, this is all true. I left home when I turned 18, when I legally could do so. My brother left in death, and my sister finally moved out at the age of 33 in the pandemic. That's a shorthand way to talk about the conditions of our house. And when my sister was still living in that house, this is 2016, maybe 2015, sorry, 2015, so a year anniversary. I was like, Denise, like, will you scan the pictures so I could do something with these pictures? I'll share it with you. I don't know what, but like, I'm tired of like all of us having this like heavy silence around these things. And so that was really kind of the entry point. And actually it was during my time at DU, you mentioned that you worked with Sela Satterstrom, the prose writer and educator. And she had this moment in a class. She doesn't even know this. I should probably tell her. But she asked this question in class. She didn't know anything about my life. But she asked, what would a radical eulogy look like? And that really like set off all these kinds of thoughts. I'm gonna just fast forward because I don't want this question to be overly long-winded. But I printed out the pictures and I cut them out too, so they could be just like the originals. And I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't have language. I just had them in my pocket all the time. And then like I'd walk my dog around Denver and I'd like throw them in the bushes every time my dog was pooping. I know, it's like a weird impulse. I don't know why, but it was springtime. There was like stuff growing, and it was kind of nice because then like a dandelion would pop up through that fissure, you know. And I was like, oh, that doesn't feel scary. That's kind of nice, you know. Like his atomic particles are probably part of our ecosystem. I don't know, you know. And then that like felt less scary in my grief. And then that kind of like denatured the pictures. So then like eventually I could sit down in my word processor, actually look at the picture, and then was like, well, I'm gonna now like put a text box over it, and then something textual is gonna happen. So that's to say, like, it's more of like my collaboration in the encounter and engagement with the image as a kind of ritual practice, which is now a ritual practice. And I can't remember, like, I think I only called those poems triptych, because like once I started one panel, I was like, I'll have too many more words. You know, like I'm gonna keep going. And I was like, well, I'm gonna call, there's 3, so I'll call it a triptych. And then Gyutaku, I would think I was just watching some weird eel documentary on PBS. I know. And I had known about Gyutaku. And Gyutaku, I like to just share, like, it's just like when sport fishing people take a big picture of their marlin. Before there was photography, you could just put ink or paint on a fish and then press it against fabric, or, you know? And that's kind of amazing. The dead body is a stamp. What? Right? Like, isn't that cool? And then you could just keep using it. Anyway, but this is a really old practice, but I kind of love the idea. So, and I had all these text body bits, and I was like, I'm just gonna use them as, hopefully I'm demystifying this process. It's like not profound. It's just like me being a toddler, like going like this in my word processor, just having fun. But mostly it's like because I feel so fucking sad that I want to do something that feels exciting. But also it's a way to like be with the difficult material. Sorry, that was like a really like roundabout, encounter.
No, that was just so wonderful, and to hear about kind of the behind the scenes process. And I've been teaching, your work in my classes, my 2 undergrad classes this semester, and I've seen, the undergrads engage so deeply, my students engage so deeply with your work. I think in part because your work is giving them permission to be playful with language, to experiment with what language and image can be, and think about ways to make something out of grief or something out of the past, a way to reckon with the past. And maybe this is leading to my next question is, so much of your work thinks through history, a kind of the individual history, the family history, but also a kind of colonial history as well. I think you're unafraid to confront that in your poetry. And there's one poem in Root Fractures where you talk about subjunctive dream and the subjunctive dreaming as a kind of mode. And I'm really curious as to, is that a kind of mode for you to think through the past? Subjunctive, being ways to talk about things that have not yet been realized or are imagined. Is that a way for you to kind of remake the past into your own, or to think through your place in history?
Oh, I love that. I'll just be like, yeah, sure. I mean, never consciously, right? But I can talk a little bit about my relationship to the subjunctive. And if you would like a grammar refresher, I'm not a grammarian, but essentially the subjunctive is like the shoulda, coulda, woulda, so it's a site of a verbal mood of like possibility. But it doesn't exist in the Vietnamese language. So this is something I kind of discovered actually maybe during my graduate studies. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense, because my parents, they're very like future tense. It's like, you will do this. And I'm like, well, I don't know, will I? And they actually don't talk about the past. They don't dwell in the past. And they're not narrating the present. So they're very future oriented. And it was only when I realized, I was like, oh, they don't, and I don't know enough about linguistics, and I know there's various kinds of theories, but I was like, if they don't have this like grammatical structure to express regret in ways that we can in English, how does that change how they think about the past? Because for them, it's like, that happened. Now, when are you going to get married? It's like that happened. When are you going to be a doctor? And I was like, oh, wrong kind of doctor. But that happened, and then that's it. It's a very binary. But for me, and I think about my brother, he was very depressive for a long time. He was an insomniac. And for him, I remember he would carry these little, to me they felt like little, but to him they were not little, wounds for years. I remember we all went to the Grand Canyon. I guess that's not too far from here. We went to the Grand Canyon once, and I was like, I'm not going on a hike. It's too hot. I will eat my granola here on this rock and watch TV with my sister. And my dad went down with my father, and he was so pissed off because he brought enough water. He was 9, by the way, and my dad was like, whatever, it's fine. And then, of course, my dad had to drink my brother's water, and my brother was so mad. He was like, that his father didn't believe him and didn't respect his research, and that little wound became a huge fissure. That he would remember that when he was 22, that wound from when he was 9, as one of the reasons, many reasons why he hated our father. And I was like, what? That wasn't even a big deal. You're not mad that he was enabling our mother to abuse us, But it's whatever. And so I'm thinking about how my brother would dwell on all these possibilities of how my parents could have parented differently. And he just couldn't propel forward. I'm not psychoanalyzing him. I don't know his subjectivity, but I was thinking about the grammatical moods that he could use, and what I don't witness my parents using. So all of that is what I'm thinking about, I think, when I'm writing in the subjunctive, because I have access to the subjunctive. And I will say, I actually do think my parents probably have the subjunctive, but in different ways that I don't necessarily recognize, I just don't hear it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking about, how you're thinking through these larger questions, and also thinking through even the sort of word choice and the grammatical choices that you're making in the poetry. And I'm curious, you have one line that really strikes me in Root Fractures where you talk about decolonizing your tongue. And you spoke about that, when you're giving the reading about moving from like Hansel and Gretel poems to and sulky poems and revisiting those works. And I'm curious as to, what are the ways that you feel like you approach sort of decolonizing the tongue for you, or what are the ways we could think about decolonizing our language?
Yeah. So I guess to talk about this, I have to talk about my relationship to the languages that I speak or understand, because I don't necessarily speak them very well. So I think it was around that first year anniversary, but my sister uncovered these old home videos, and like nobody had seen them since they were made, like little DV tapes or VHS. And so we got them digitized, and nobody wanted to watch them. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I was like, I want to watch them. And then I'm just like sobbing, because like my brother's still alive. I'm also like laughing. I'm like, look at these fuckers like running around. It's like so cheerful, But one crazy thing happened. I learned that my first language is Vietnamese. That is wild. When you think that your first language is English, and then you see 4-year-old you like running around in the slang dialect of your father's Southern Viet, you're like, well, who's that? I know that's me, but like my memory of that is entirely in English. And I was like, what happened? I mean, I know what happened. My parents were scared I was going to be what was then called like ESL. Like they were worried I was going to be ESL, so they were like, no English, no Vietnamese, only English in the house. So I could understand household Vietnamese, and then I would only speak in English. So discovering that, I was like, wait, but I want her, I want that. And actually around the time that I think that I was like writing this work, I was also taking Vietnamese classes, or trying to. And I'm actually, this is the trying to part. I'm in Vietnamese 1 again, like I took Vietnamese 1 3 years ago, and there I am again, still struggling with prepositions. This is related to decolonizing, but not quite there yet, but I wanted to share this. I highly recommend doing it. Like any kind of heritage language, even if it's a language that you are fluent in and you can read it, there's something different about like the official way of it's being taught that I realized I was like, oh, my vocabulary and how I define words is very different from like the dictionary. But I like my dictionary too. I think it's valid, right? Like the ones that you form. Mine is like a brackish water in between like the official and then those who can't. But crazy thing, I realized I learned so much about my parents. I learned that they were racist. I didn't know. Because in class, like there was a word for Chinese people, and I was like, oh, I know this word, and then I said it. And then you could see the teacher go, oh, we don't use that word. This is the official word. And I was like, oh, fuck, I was the redneck. I literally just said a racial epithet. Like I didn't know. And I was like, oh my God. I was mortified, but I also was like, whoa. But that's like the word my parents fling around. So I called them and I was like, so how come you never called Chinese people this? And they're like, oh yeah, well, we only say that at home. And I was like, well, nobody told me, and like they're so flippant about it. And like, I'm not 12, so like I'm fascinated. What else is it about how they talk and their shorthand that I'm like still trying to learn about them? And I'm also learning about like this reconciliation of like me and vocabulary. So that's not quite decolonizing, but I think it's kind of adjacent. And there's also my realizing too, like the word robinet is not Vietnamese, it's actually French, because my dad always called faucet robinet. And I always thought that was Vietnamese, but like no fucking way. Actually it's voy nước. So there's ways in which I was like, well, why is he speaking French for some of these words? And then to kind of go to of course, he went to a French Catholic school, but of course there's a history of French colonizers, but there were so many colonizers before the French too. And so doing that kind of like linguistic research and trying to untangle it, and it was just so messy. And so something wild happens, like I'm trained as a poet, I'm taking language classes, and then I didn't have a child when I was writing that one sequence, but like, it was like you had deja vu. And as you're trying to learn the language again, it starts to come back to you, and like phrases will come back, but you don't know what they mean, but you can say them and you know when to say them. It's wild. And so I was like, that would happen when I was writing. And I was like, I'm gonna stick it in. but also this sounds like this English thing. So like I'm working in this like in between, and I just wanted to keep that, right? So it wasn't like I was trying to decolonize, but I really was trying to interrogate like, what is the language that my parents are using and why? They don't think about it, but I can think about it, you know? And I have a lot of feelings about it. So that's kind of where I'm at now, yeah.
Yeah, that's really rich to hear the ways that you're thinking through the space of the in-between. You know, and I see that so much reflected in the multimedia work and in how granular you are in interrogating language. Yes, thank you so much for those answers, and we'll.
Thanks, Wendy.
Of course.